Charles Manson. The name alone sends shivers down the spine, evoking a sense of dread and unease. Even decades after his heinous crimes, Manson remains a chilling symbol of evil. His name is synonymous with chaos, violence, and the dark side of the 1960s counterculture. The mere mention of his name conjures images of a time when the world seemed to teeter on the edge of madness. The summer of love, Woodstock, the peace movement, the 1960s were a time of immense social change and upheaval. It was an era marked by a quest for freedom, love, and a break from the conventional norms of society. Yet, beneath the surface of this cultural revolution, a darkness was brewing. The idealism of the era masked a growing undercurrent of disillusionment and unrest. This was the world into which Charles Manson stepped, a world ripe for manipulation and exploitation. A charismatic and deeply disturbed individual, Manson would exploit the vulnerabilities of this era to devastating effect. He was a master manipulator, able to twist the hopes and dreams of his followers into a nightmarish reality. Manson assembled a group of lost and searching souls, mostly young women who became known as the Manson family. These individuals were often seeking meaning and belonging in a world that seemed increasingly chaotic. He promised them love, acceptance, and a new world order. To his followers, Manson was a messianic figure, offering salvation and a sense of purpose. Instead, he led them down a path of unimaginable violence, culminating in the brutal murders that would shock the world. The Manson family's crimes were not just acts of violence, they were statements meant to incite fear and chaos. This is the story of Charles Manson and the family. It is a story that delves into the darkest corners of the human psyche and the terrifying power of manipulation. It is a story about the allure of power, the seductive nature of control, and how one man's twisted vision could lead to such devastation. The fragility of the human psyche is a central theme in this tale. Manson preyed on the insecurities and vulnerabilities of his followers, turning their search for meaning into a weapon of destruction. And the enduring darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most idealistic movements. The Manson saga serves as a grim reminder that even in times of hope and change, the seeds of darkness can take root and flourish, leading to unimaginable horrors.
To understand the monster Charles Manson would become, we must first look back at the shadows of his early life. His journey into darkness began long before the world knew his name. Born in 1934, Manson's childhood was a portrait of neglect and abuse. His mother, a troubled woman, was often absent, leaving young Charles to fend for himself in a world that seemed indifferent to his existence. Abandoned by his mother, shuffled between relatives and institutions, young Charles never experienced the stability and love every child deserves. Each new home brought new challenges, and the lack of a consistent, nurturing environment left him feeling isolated and unloved. This lack of a stable upbringing left deep scars on his psyche. The constant rejection and instability fostered a deep-seated anger and mistrust of the world around him. These early experiences would shape his worldview and his interactions with others for the rest of his life. He turned to petty crime at a young age, ending up in and out of reform schools and prisons. Each stint behind bars only hardened him further, reinforcing his belief that the world was a hostile place where only the cunning and ruthless could survive. Behind bars, Manson developed a potent mix of charisma and cunning. He learned to navigate the prison hierarchy, using his charm to manipulate those around him. This ability to influence others would become one of his most dangerous traits. He learned to manipulate others, honing his skills of persuasion and control. Manson's time in prison was not just about survival, it was a training ground where he perfected the art of psychological manipulation. His time in prison also exposed him to a variety of ideologies and belief systems. He immersed himself in books, absorbing knowledge on religion, philosophy, and psychology. This eclectic mix of ideas would later form the foundation of his twisted belief system. He delved into music, philosophy, and even Scientology, absorbing information and twisting it to fit his own warped worldview. Music, in particular, became a tool for him to express his inner turmoil and to attract followers who were searching for meaning in a chaotic world. By the time he was released in 1967, on the eve of the Summer of Love, Charles Manson was a powder keg of resentment, ambition, and deeply ingrained anger, primed to explode. The counterculture movement of the 1960s provided the perfect backdrop for Manson to unleash his dark vision. He was ready to find a new kind of family, one he could mold and control. Manson's charisma and manipulative skills allowed him to gather a group of devoted followers, creating a surrogate family that would ultimately carry out his horrific plans.
The mid-1960s were a time of profound change. The Vietnam War raged, civil rights protests filled the streets, and a generation of young people questioned authority and traditional values. In this turbulent environment, Charles Manson, now a charismatic figure with a guitar and a message of peace and love, found fertile ground for his twisted ideology. He traveled to San Francisco, the epicenter of the counterculture movement, and began attracting followers. Drawn to his charisma and message of free love, runaways and disillusioned youth flocked to him. They were looking for belonging, for meaning in a world that seemed to be spinning out of control. Manson, a master manipulator, provided them with a sense of family and purpose. He preached a blend of counterculture ideals, twisted Bible verses, and his own bizarre philosophies. He demanded absolute loyalty and obedience, using manipulation, intimidation, and drugs to control his family. Among his most devoted followers were young women like Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten, who would later become deeply implicated in his crimes. As Manson tightened his grip on his followers, his teachings became increasingly bizarre and sinister. He began to preach about an impending apocalyptic race war, which he called Helter Skelter, inspired by a misinterpretation of the Beatles' song of the same name. Manson believed that black people would rise up and overthrow the white establishment, but would be incapable of ruling themselves. He envisioned that his family would then emerge from hiding, after riding out the apocalypse in a secret city located beneath Death Valley, and rule over the remnants of society. To hasten this supposed race war, Manson hatched a plan to commit a series of horrific crimes that he believed would be blamed on black militants. He hoped these murders would ignite the racial tensions he predicted. His followers, completely under his sway, were willing to do anything for their leader, even kill. The stage was set for one of the most horrific crimes in American history. On the night of August 8, 1969, Charles Manson, the infamous cult leader, sent 4 of his most loyal followers, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, on a mission that would forever scar the American psyche. Their target was a luxurious house in the upscale neighborhood of Beverly Hills. This was no ordinary home. It belonged to the rising star actress Sharon Tate and her husband, the acclaimed director Roman Polanski. Polanski was away in Europe working on a film project, but Tate, who was 8 months pregnant, was at home hosting a small gathering of friends. Among them were celebrity hairdresser Jay Sebring, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, and her boyfriend, writer Wojciech Frykowski. The evening was meant to be a peaceful get-together, but it turned into a night of sheer horror. What followed was a scene of unimaginable brutality. The Manson family members, armed with knives and a gun, stormed the house, bringing terror and chaos. The intruders showed no mercy. They stabbed and shot their victims repeatedly, turning the serene home into a blood-soaked nightmare. The violence was relentless. Sharon Tate, who was only weeks away from giving birth, pleaded desperately for the life of her unborn child. Her cries fell on deaf ears as she was stabbed 16 times. The brutality didn't end there. The word pig was scrawled on the front door in Tate's blood, a chilling message intended to incite racial tensions and implicate black militants. The aftermath of the murders sent shockwaves through Los Angeles and reverberated across the nation. The sheer savagery of the crime, coupled with the high-profile status of the victims, left the public in a state of shock and disbelief. The city of Los Angeles, known for its glitz and glamour, was now the backdrop for one of the most gruesome crimes in American history. News of the murders dominated headlines, and the public was gripped by fear and fascination. The brutality of the crime, coupled with the high profile of the victims, gripped the nation. People were left wondering who could commit such a heinous act and why. Who were these monsters? And what could have motivated such a horrific act? The answers would unfold in the months to come, revealing a dark and twisted tale of manipulation, control, and a misguided quest for apocalyptic revolution.